So I am one of those people who hasn't really spoken at a conference before. I do speak a lot, but not at conferences. I am doing a PhD at Leeds University. Before that, I've been working in the museum sector for about 7 years, but always working in collections management. So that might be quite different from what a lot of people here work with. But what I'm interested in is how collections management can work with digital objects in the future. So my presentation is what does it mean? What happens when social media becomes part of the collection? So I demand an explanation. So what is social media? Amelia Wong gave me a really, well, I don't know her, but she uses a really good definition. Digitally networked sites that encourage and facilitate social interaction, communication, and information exchange. And I quite like that idea. So what could social media be to us? A valuable record of contemporary life, an insight into the 21st century human behaviour and interaction, a place for cultural production. So what am I suggesting we do with it? Well, collect it, as I said. So what is different about a museum collecting social media? Social media exists on the web, you can search for it, it's quite well indexed. But why is that any different from an archive that may collect it, or a library that may collect it? Because there is work going on in the sector already. My PhD aims to look at museums and collections management and how that works with it all together. So is it any different to web archiving? Are we collecting a spreadsheet full of data? Are we just taking screenshots of the web and collecting those? I don't think so, but I don't have all the answers yet. So what type of things might we be collecting? What might be a social media object? Memes, the title of my presentation. So memes are actually older than I originally thought. The term meme was originally coined by Richard Dawkins in 1976, which is a really surprising fact. But it essentially means small units of culture that spread from person to person by copying or imitation. Today, the term is most commonly used for internet memes, and they're normally used to spread jokes or make commentary on social situations. So as you can see here, we've got one on Theresa May saying the naughtiest thing she ever did was run through a field of wheat using the Maze Runner, which is a film out at the time. And there's also a whole new sort of genre of art memes, which I think are amazing. There's ones on vegan January. So there's lots going on out there. Also, another type of object might be social digital photography. So I take this definition from a project that's currently going on in Scandinavia. It's a 3-year project called Collecting Social Photography. It's a project between institutions in Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. But it's essentially the types of photographs that we take on our phones, that we tweet, that we exchange with each other, that we never actually print off and make physical anymore. So as digital technology becomes increasingly powerful and portable, the means of the self and self-expression have changed as well. Here there is a selfie. There's me, there's my sister. But also known as a groupie now, because there's groups of people in a selfie. This is a photograph I took of Darwin's octopus, which is in the Natural History Museum's collection. And I tweeted it because I was so excited that he had a pet octopus. And this is the type of photograph that someone who's pretending to be arty and jumping on the iPhoneography bandwagon might put on Instagram. And things like iPhoneography have now been starting to be explored as an artistic form in itself. So that's quite interesting. And we've got GIFs. I don't think... well, GIFs, I love GIFs anyway. They started life as a graphic interchange format, a file format that is, but today they're used as a visual communication method. They're normally an animated clip or a short silent looping image. Here we have what is believed to be the first of its kind from 1987. Here we have Ed Miliband well, I don't know what he's doing really. But it's a really good example of the Miller fandom that grew out of the 2015 general election, where there was a whole group of mainly teenage girls who fell in love with Ed Miliband. And then we have here an example of a GIF that covers two things. One of them being the reaction GIF, that's a nice high five going on there, but also our obsession with cats and the internet's obsession with cats. But it could also be the social media post in itself that's interesting to us. So here are a few social media posts which I think could be interesting. We've got the iconic tweet from Ed Balls that just says, Ed Balls. We've got Hillary Clinton taking on Donald Trump at the beginning of their campaigns. We've got an image of Cardiff Chippy Alley on a match day, which shows the extent of the carnage that happens there. Another Facebook event there for running through a field of wheat. I didn't go to that one. And here we have some sort of commentary that was going on at the start of the Me Too movement, I suppose, where someone tweeted, "Is there a badder bitch than Taylor Swift?" And lots of people took that and started talking about some real historical women who had real challenging lives and did some amazing things, and really taking on that tweet and moving with it. So, why though? Why do we want to collect this? So social media may be a contemporary form in itself, but there is a history to this sort of digital communication method that has been building since the birth of the World Wide Web. We've got early ASCII emoticons. We've got instant messaging with MSN. That MSN messenger noise still sort of haunts me from me growing up. Flash animation, which is no longer supported. And then we've got the birth of Web 2.0 and social media with things like MySpace and PhotoBucket, things that aren't really used anymore, and a lot of people have lost information from that. We've got the proliferation of selfie culture, we've got internet memes and GIFs. So there is a rich history to this digital culture that we live in today, and early forms of visual internet culture have shaped the way that many of us live. Is it not the responsibility of museums to collect this, to represent how we live our lives today and save some of it for the future? When Yahoo shut down GeoCities in 2009, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but it was described by some digital preservationists as destroying the most amount of history in the shortest amount of time in known memory. Millions of files, user accounts, all gone. And we don't really think about digital in that way a lot of the time. So, how do we collect social media? I made this meme myself. Thank you. One does not simply right-click and save. You can't just right-click and save an image from social media. I'm not normally a fan of overcomplicating things, but it's just too simplistic approach. We'd come into all sorts of issues with image quality, metadata, copyright. The person who posted it needs to be involved. And note I say the person who posted it, because they may not always be the person who created it, but that's one of the things that we're going to have to grapple with in terms of collecting social media and memes and GIFs. The user who, or the person who created it, is often de-emphasized, and that's really sort of in conflict with how museums try to manage copyright. Well, how anybody tries to manage copyright, so that's quite interesting. One way that we could possibly do it is looking at Rhizome's web recorder. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's a potential candidate that I want to explore. But essentially, it's an online tool for recording the internet. It includes links, and it plays it back not as a video, but as an authentic web experience. So you can browse through the internet in the same way as you would. It's really interesting, and I'm going to explore that a lot more. So, what are the implications for museum collections management? Now, my favourite subject. There are lots of implications, so I'm just going to talk about one for now, but cataloguing. So, in the museum sector, in collections management, we have a collections management standard called Spectrum, and I'll be examining all the Spectrum procedures, but essentially they give an overview of the types of information you should be trying to record about an object in a museum collection. Well, I've highlighted here dimensions, material, physical characteristics. Now, I wonder what a physical characteristic of a meme is. It doesn't quite fit within the way that museums currently think about cataloguing their collections. So there's going to be some interesting conversations and interesting experiments about how we can record information within this spectrum standard. But it's not just museums who are struggling with it. This is the Twitter archive of the National Archives, and they currently archive the government's Twitter and YouTube accounts. But although they are doing that and preserving it, that's great. There doesn't seem to be any searchable metadata. There's no information recorded about it, so you can't really tell where its significance is. And here we have a page from the website knowyourmeme.com. And Know Your Meme has already started to catalogue memes. They've got the origins of the Nyan cat with a full history of it, including copyright infringement claims and information on that. So it seems like the best kind of work about cataloguing our digital history at the moment is going on outside the cultural sector. So what can we learn from this? That is what I want to ask as part of my PhD. But now I'm just going to quickly go through some examples where museums have started engaging with social media in different ways. I probably should explain this a bit further back, but spectrum doesn't include just the acquisition of objects and what you do with them when they're in the museum. It includes the displaying of them and everything you might want to do with an object when it's in the museum. So there are lots of different things that we want to do with our objects. One example of interesting work with social media, live social media, is the Pulse installation at the Museum of London at the moment. It's in the Sackler Hall, I think. And this essentially tracks live social media and turns it into visuals. This one over here was the most used emojis on the day of the general election in London. So I don't know what was going on over here. But there's quite a few interesting emojis going on there. I think the plan is eventually to collect a data set of this when it finishes in April. And it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Here we have Excellent and Perfections, which was a piece of contemporary art, so social media is art. So Amalia Ullman created this 3-part performance over 5 months and explored how women present themselves online. By the final post of the project, over 88,000, well, close to 89,000 followers had been amassed. And it was only then that Amalia revealed that it had all been a piece of performance art. So these are the Instagram posts. And it's actually been on display in Tate and Whitechapel. But what I thought was interesting there was they printed them out and put them on the wall like a piece of analog art, when part of the reason for doing this piece of art was the type of comments you get, the way that people are seen online. So it's kind of lost its point. So I think that's an interesting element to look at. We've also got social media on display. So Museum of the Moving Image in New York, this is a reaction GIF. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to quickly go through this. They're not collected, but they are looking at GIFs as forms of reaction without text. And then, maybe not for the museum, but a really interesting exhibition. The Daily Show did a pop-up exhibition in June 2017 called the Donald J. Trump Presidential Twitter Library, which essentially looked at Donald Trump's tweets and turned them into what could be a presidential library in the future. So it's a really interesting way of displaying tweets. They display them as tweets. They have sort of all sorts of weird and wonderful tweeting from a golden toilet events. I would show it, but I haven't got time to show it. But you can find it online, but it provides a really good way to start looking at how we could use social media in a physical gallery environment. And that is me. So that's the end of my talk for now. Just a quick insight into what I'm doing. Are there any questions?
Can I give you a clap first?
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Whose responsibility do you feel it is to collect social media things?
Yeah. So whose responsibility is it to collect social media? I think it can be the existing type of collection institutions that there are. So I know the Library of Congress signed a deal with Twitter to archive all of Twitter, but they have since said that they're not going to do that anymore because they couldn't do it. So in terms of archiving massive sets of social media, I don't think that's the role of the museum. That's not what a museum does. It's more about the individual objects of significance and how they can tell a story. So preserving social media may be the jobs of the companies or the social media companies or archives that do web archiving. And I think the role of the museum is slightly different in taking elements of social media and telling a story about contemporary life with that.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to carry on with that thing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that great site, knowyourmeme.com, and you imagine if, I don't know, is it a wiki? Is there a wiki there? Because I'm sure I've seen another
I'm not sure.
memehistory.com or something like that.
I think there are...
Thank you, give it to Wikimedia and say,
Run with it.
run with it.
Yeah.
And, because who better to document memes than the internet,
No, there is a meme librarian who works for Tumblr, which is quite an interesting job. What a cool title. So that work is going on. And it may be that I decide at the end of my PhD that museums shouldn't collect social media. But I think we should start exploring this sort of role of the memory institution in actually preserving that. Yeah, hi.
So you mentioned that there's a lot of complicated issues surrounding copyright and ownership. When it comes to sort of putting these memes in exhibits and then thinking about in the gift shop if you want to print them on t-shirts and bags and things, like how are you going to begin to navigate that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
We're talking about how Twitter has been communicating with the Library of Congress to, well, I guess Twitter would own all of it, but so many other ones are just on the internet.
Interestingly, when someone posts something on social media, if you look at the terms and conditions of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, most of them have the same sort of terms of agreement. And they explicitly say that the user who posted it continues to own it, but they have the right to do whatever they want with it, royalty-free. So for a museum to start collecting in that way, they need to get into that participatory culture frame of mind as well, I suppose, where they can have something in the museum, but it doesn't mean that they own exclusive rights to do anything they want with it, as it is quite often with museums now. So I think it's a change of culture as well.
Do you think a digital asset management system would be better suited to catalog the stuff than a traditional collection management system?
Oh, so in my old job, I was a collections information and systems manager, and I worked with a collections management system and a digital asset management system. So I think they have the ability to store them and record sort of technical metadata about them. I think the collections management system, where you would catalogue an object, has a different sort of information structure, more in line with the museum. And I think they would need to be catalogued in both. But
those systems need to grow more.
They need to grow more together, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll just last question, and then we'll
Okay. Yeah.
Do you mind if I just follow up Bert's question? So, what's really interesting to me is how we have a kind of clash of museum culture, museum indexing and cataloguing culture with the way that people, sometimes chaotically, but often in a really, really good mimetic way, decide as a group, as a crowd, what a hashtag should be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a kind of interesting, really kind of dynamic space between people choosing hashtags based on campaigns or issues or things, and people in the museum world cataloguing and creating vocabularies and taxonomies and so on. There's a really interesting gap, and I think that Bert was talking about it when you were talking about how do you get a CMS to catalogue and keep and save and preserve Twitter objects. But how on earth are we meant to manage the gap between collectively, publicly chosen hashtags and museum cataloguing systems?
It's a very good question. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the answer either, yeah. There are so many taxonomies out there that don't match with the way that we describe our digital culture right now. Is it worth trying to create a new one that's always going to be on the back foot as we move so fast? Or do we move over to that folksonomy style, allowing that dual way of cataloguing in museums where we catalogue things in a museum in the way that we need to categorise them, and because museums need to be able to categorise, otherwise they would fall over and couldn't do anything. But there needs to be that way of doing it alongside that way of people being able to contribute their own understanding of what these objects are to them. So there should perhaps be a dual way of doing that. Yeah.
There's quite a lot of writing about it that goes back 10 years or so to the Steve Museum Project and Jeffrey Trump's work. Yeah. But there's still, no one really has done much about the recent psychologies of how we tag cultural objects in social media, and it would be good to see someone do that.
I'll try. Thank you.
And Aaron, like certainly most, if not all of our speakers, is going to be at the drinks reception later, so you'll be able to quiz him and all of them later on.